and good Friday evening, everyone. Of course, my name is Francis Tarasiewicz. I'm a meteorologist and weather observer coming to you live from the summit of Mount Washington. And boy, is there a lot to talk about. We've got the remnants of Debbie, post-tropical cyclone Debbie now. And yeah, there's a flood of advisories associated with the storm. Of course, there's also a lot of flooding going on in the region, including up here in the weather center as well. We've had a persistent southerly and westerly wind, and that's brought some water into the weather room. So we've had to mop a little bit today, but again, a lot of other areas are experiencing much more significant impacts in terms of flooding. And so to highlight that, I want to show you all the current watches, warnings, and advisories that have been issued by the National Weather Service for the Eastern Seaboard. And if we look, we see a bunch of different colors. And of course, I'm one for the holidays. I love to see different colored lights during Christmas time and things like that. But when you see a weather advisory board lit up like this, it's definitely not a good thing. So what we see here are tornado watches in yellow extending all the way down to central New Jersey. As far north as just south of Burlington. We've got some flash flood warnings, mainly across areas of Pennsylvania and western New York State. These are pretty large flash flood warnings as well. Flood watches continue for the northern areas of New England, including the White Mountains and Mount Washington itself. Elsewhere, these brown areas indicate areas where there are wind advisories. Wind gusts are expected to be above 35 miles per hour or so. So the folks of the National Weather Service are hard at work issuing watches and warnings with the system as it makes its way through. We've got another 12 to 18 hours to deal with what's left of Debbie before it's out of here. So that's some good news there. But again, just want to tip my hat to the folks of the National Weather Service putting out these watches and warnings. And of course, the tornado watch here, highlighted in yellow, goes into effect through about 10 p.m. this evening. So have a way to get weather warnings if you're an early sleeper like I am. If you have a 8 p.m. bedtime or something like that, just have a way to get weather watches and warnings sent directly to your phone to alert you to any possible tornado warnings. Zooming into the summit of Mount Washington here, of course, we're being heavily impacted up here on the summit. So at the moment, we've got 54-mile-per-hour winds, and those winds have been increasing throughout the afternoon. We set a peak gust to 84 miles per hour, so we're hoping to beat our intern's wind record of 93 miles per hour in their final week here with us for the summer. We're getting close. We have gusts up to about 95 miles per hour forecasted through the overnight. But again, the strength of these winds will only go up through the overnight. Another thing to note is just how almost isothermal the temperatures are going up from the base of the Mount Washington all the way up to the summit. Difference in temperature 64 degrees or down to 57 degrees up here on the summit, which is really common in these tropical air masses, which contain a lot of moisture. The temperature actually doesn't change a whole lot when you have a whole lot of moisture in the atmosphere. And so we have a deep layer of moisture going all the way up to the tropopause. So that's what's resulting in a lot of the flooding concerns that we're beginning to see unfold with the remnants of Debbie. So speaking of Debbie, we can take a look at the progress of the system over the last day or so. Interesting thing to note here is that when we start this loop, Debbie started as a nearly symmetrical tropical system. It was a tropical depression over areas of Virginia. And as it's come north now, it's undergone what's called an extratropical transition. It's gone from a more of a tropical-like system to something more akin to a nor'easter or a fall storm, something we're used to here in the Northeast. Nor'easters, of course, track offshore, but in this case, Debbie's tracked well inland and has, again, transitioned to more of an extratropical cyclone. And so you can see here, it started off more symmetric, and now it is more, it's got more of a frontal band associated with it. And that was just really cool to see as a meteorologist in real time, that unfold. Of course, the impacts remain the same. Lots of areas are still experiencing high winds, heavy rainfall. But again, just from a meteorological and scientific perspective, watching this storm transition like that is always pretty neat to see. Looking up at around 18,000 feet or so, same kind of view, same time frame here. You can see Debbie again, starting off nice and symmetric down near the mid-Atlantic, but as it's come north, it's become more extratropical. It's got more of a banded structure to it. It looks more like what we call a baroclinic leaf in the field here. And that's a result of this upper level low, which is sort of meandered around the upper Great Lakes. That's pushed a lot of energy and drier air into the system, into the equation, so it's transitioning it more from a purely tropical system to more of an extratropical system. That just means low pressure systems that are north of the tropics. But really cool to see. This upper level low is going to be the next weather maker as it makes its way over the Northeast. That's coming up. I want to talk a little bit more about Debbie. So, of course, the interaction between these two has resulted in a strengthening storm system, which if we zoom in here in the Northeast, you see a little bit of a spin there over New York State, and that's where the center of the low is what was Debbie. And currently, yeah, it's got more of a comma head shape to it instead of a purely tropical shape to it. So underneath that comma head, we're getting quite a bit of heavy rainfall. Here we go, looking at the radar. You can see areas of heavy rain extending from western New York, moving unfortunately into the state of Vermont. And unfortunately, this whole complex is going to be moving north and east The good news is that it's moving a little bit more quickly, I should say, than was previously modeled and forecasted. But still, the impacts will largely be the same. The rain is just so heavy, even though it is going to last a little bit shorter than we previously thought. It's still going to produce a lot of flash flooding, unfortunately, especially in watersheds near the White Mountains, where those watersheds are only 20 miles or so large. And so what happens is those load up a lot of water, especially up here on the summit of Mount Washington, and that water has nowhere else to go but down into local rivers and streams. And so we'll watch this comma head, as I mentioned, system move through. Really, the peak of it will be over the next 3 to 8 hours or so, especially up here in the White Mountains and for Mount Washington in particular. Let's time things out now. Going forward, we'll use the North American Mesoscale model, one of the many models in our tool bag, but it's, I think, best representing this particular event. So we can see what's left of Debbie beginning to wind up here overnight. We see lots of areas of red and yellows. Some thunderstorms as well in the southern portions of New Hampshire and Vermont. And those thunderstorms could rotate and produce brief but intense tornadoes going into the overnight. So you definitely want to have a way to get weather alerts, as I said earlier. But we'll time this out. Continuing on in the overnight, you see the center of the low racing north and east, which is a good thing, right? Less in the way of stalled out areas of heavy rainfall. Lowers the flooding risk somewhat, but not 100%. So we'll still see areas of flooding. We're still expecting between 2 and 4 inches around the region of rainfall. But we'll see that system gradually pull away. This is by Saturday morning now. We're mostly clear. We'll have some upslope drizzle and rain showers up here in the White Mountains. So if you are hiking, you'll want to prepare for that. And moving throughout the day, Saturday, we'll have a drying trend and eventually a clearing trend. We have a transient area of high pressure that will move through the afternoon on Saturday, and so that'll clear things up just a little bit up here on the summit. But it will cool down, as that was a cold front that pushed through overnight in this particular model run. And so we'll see things cool even a little bit more Sunday, or Saturday night, I should say. And then, of course, the upper level low, which pushed Debbie up into the northeast, will make its presence known on Sunday. So we'll start the day Sunday mostly clear, and then we'll see pockets of showers and thunderstorms develop. Upper level lows, they tend to have a lot of cold air aloft, and so if you have warm summer-like temperatures near the surface, the warm air is going to rise, and it's going to rise pretty quickly, so we'll get some showers and thunderstorms that will form. They'll start across portions of northern New York and make their way eastward. They should be scattered in nature, and we're not expecting much in the way of severe weather, but of course, you want to keep an eye on the forecast to see if that does indeed change. But at the moment, not expecting much in the way of severe weather for Sunday, and definitely not a washout either, just a lot of widespread rain showers and thunderstorms. In terms of winds, this is really the big story up here on the summit, as it always is. We tend to get the strongest winds of any kind of system. That's no exception with Debbie. You can see the core of this upper level or this low level jet really making its presence known in just a couple of hours, around dinner time for us. You can see winds in excess of 74 miles per hour, around 5,000 feet or so. There's even some 80 and 90 mile per hour valleys in there. And so we can continue the clock forward. The peak of the winds for the summit will likely be between 8 and, say, midnight or so. It's a really small, low-level jet, but really feisty, as I was saying earlier, gusting already to 84 miles per hour. So we're hoping the interns can see stronger winds than they've experienced. But that low-level jet is out of here pretty quickly as the system gets going. It gets entrained in that upper-level low and pretty much shoved out to sea overnight. This is around midnight or so. We'll continue the clock forward. Winds will calm somewhat tomorrow. Will still be pretty gusty if you're visiting us up here. We'll have more of a northwesterly or westerly component to the wind, so that'll help to dry things out a little bit. The weaken somewhat again Sunday, but then we've got that upper level trough making its way in by Sunday morning. You can see some of those oranges and reds returning. The winds won't be as strong as they are tonight going into the later part of Sunday, but they will be on the increase, so that's something to keep in mind if you're up here visiting us up here in the White Mountains. The final thing I want to talk about are temperatures. You can see a tropical air mass overhead right now. Again, temperatures up here in the upper 50s, which is unseasonably mild. No surprise, we got that southeasterly flow pumping in a lot of moist, warm, tropical air. And so going overnight, advancing the clock here, sorry to stand in the way, you can see a lot of those yellows continuing. It'll be a fairly mild night, at least for the first half. You can see out to the west, lots of blues as a cold front starts to move through. These are temperatures that are in the upper 40s for us up here on the summit of Mount Washington. And they'll take their time to get here, but they'll be here by Saturday afternoon and evening. This is Saturday evening. And moving the clock forward, temperatures potentially getting down into the lower 40s by Saturday night. And we could have a little bit of a wind chill to contend with, maybe down into the 30s and 20s or so. But I'll talk about that in greater detail in just a couple of minutes here. So going through the day Sunday, more of the same. We've got that broad, much colder air mass, at least aloft in the atmosphere, making its way in overhead by Sunday evening. You can see it spinning in. Gets even cooler Sunday evening and start of the work week. So we'll have that in the next edition of the Higher Summits Forecast, which will be released at 4 a.m. Tomorrow morning. But for this edition of the Higher Summits Forecast, let's break down the daily details for the overnight. No surprise here, we'll be in the clouds, rain, as well as a chance of thunderstorms, and a few of those storms could be severe. We'll keep an eye on that. Temperatures will fall back to the mid-50s. And winds will be the big story here. South gradually shifting to the west at 50 to 70 miles per hour early, 60 to 80 miles per hour with gusts up to 95 miles per hour around midnight. Again, that low-level jet will be right overhead. But quickly moving out, we'll see winds rapidly decreasing to 25 to 40 miles per hour later overnight. So we'll have an intense few hours up here on the rock pile. We'll be rumbling around here. But anyways, for the day on Saturday, we'll be mostly in the clouds. We'll see mostly cloudy skies. The best chance for rain showers will be in the morning. Thereafter, sort of clearing as the day goes on. Temperatures will recover somewhat into the upper 50s, so it'll be a pretty decent day. But those winds will keep it feeling a little bit more chilly, 25 to 40 miles per hour, gradually increasing to 40 to 55 miles per hour a little later in the day. Saturday night, in and out of the clouds, mostly cloudy skies there, so we'll see peaks of stars hopefully from the summit. There'll be a slight chance of rain showers, again, mainly early, but we'll see a drying trend overnight. Temperatures will fall back into the lower 40s, and with winds 40 to 55 miles per hour, decreasing to 20 to 35 miles per hour. They'll feel a little closer to 25 to 35 above zero. So we're already talking about wind chills as we start our step towards the cooler season up here on the summit of Mount Washington. Finally, for Sunday, we'll be in and out of the clouds and partly cloudy skies. We'll see a chance of rain showers late, maybe an isolated thunderstorm or two. But again, that'll be the exception and not the rule up here on the summit. Temperatures will be a little bit cooler than they were Saturday, upper 40s or so. Winds will be from the west at 20 to 35 miles per hour early, 10 to 25 miles per hour around the midday hours, and increasing a little bit as that upper level low makes its way in between 25 and 40 miles per hour a little bit later. That's all I have for this update of the Higher Summits Forecast. I want to thank you all for logging on and watching this latest broadcast. And of course, heed any watches or warnings that are issued by the National Weather Service going into the overnight. Flash flood watches and tornado watches as well. And yeah, if you want to find the latest Higher Summits Forecast, go to mountwashington.org/forecast. And with that, I want to thank you all and hope you all have a happy, healthy, and safe weekend.